Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other Friday to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
It's beginning to look a lot like Festivus here in Virginia. We've got a bunch of snow on the ground. We've got kids home from school. It's just, we're still 2 weeks away from the big break, but it is beginning to feel like Advent is getting closer to the end. Lessons and carols and everyone buying Christmas presents and all that. How are you guys doing in H-Town?
Good. I got all my Christmas shopping done, and we have a son that has a birthday in December. Okay, but wait. So on Monday, I was like, okay, if there are parents listening to this with children in the car, turn it down. So on Monday, I was like, yo, you got to put Santa Claus together. Because, Josh is a priest, so, Christmas Eve night is, there's no way it's going to happen on Christmas Eve night. And he put the boxes in his car to take them to be recycled, and he did not take them. And our son opened the door and was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a MorfBoard, which is all he wanted. So now we're spending more money because I don't want to tell him Santa's not real.
Parenting fail.
So that's what I get for doing all of it early. So
what's a MorfBoard?
It is probably a piece of you-know-what, but it looks like a scooter, really cheaply made, but you can also turn it into a skateboard, and then you can, it also has, other attachments, so you can put, almost small yoga balls will go on the bottom of it, and you can bounce it.
I've seen the commercials. Yeah. They look amazing.
He's, dying for one. So, anyway, he's getting one courtesy of us, and then Santa Claus is getting him more stuff.
What about the Heyman household?
We are excited and a little anxious, too, because I don't think we've actually done any Christmas shopping at all. My wife may have done a little bit, and they're now less than 2 weeks left. But this is kind of par for the course. We got the tree up, which is good with the lights on, and our 2-year-old Marshall just freaked out and loved it so much, and it was very exciting. He may not remember, but this is the first Christmas he'll kind of care about in the moment. But then we were going to put the ornaments on, but my oldest son, who'd been up till 2 a.m. the night before studying, promptly he fell asleep. So that was 3 days ago, and we don't have any ornaments on the tree yet. So we're going to screech in to Christmas this year as usual, but looking forward to it. Always kind of a crazy, joyful, expectant, anxious time.
Well, I'm glad to know we're not alone, not having done a single bit of Christmas shopping yet.
Oh, praise God, Dave.
Have you checked your wife's Amazon accounts? Maybe you just don't know. Cause...
That's true. I always I keep asking, and she's just like, can we just talk about this later? Can we just talk about this later?
That's amazing.
Speaking of which, we just put up the Mockingbird gift guide this past week, and if you want to go full churchy fangirl jack wagon level, you get RJ. You get the Dolly Parton prayer candle.
So up my alley.
RJ, I guess we would probably give you the Nicolas Cage prayer candle. I think
I love that.
Absolutely, huge
100%
Nick Cage fan. Yes.
Well, the season of giving is upon us. Here's a nice segue for you. We here at the Mockingbird HQ have just spent the last week or so sending out all of our end-of-the-year letters, our appeal letters, our update letters, telling you all the cool things that have happened this year and everything that or a smidge of what we've got planned for next year. And we need your help. This is, takes money, resources to make the Mockingcast and all the other things we do. And we're actually in a little bit of a hole right now from this past year from some expenses we didn't foresee. But a lot of wonderful supporters out there, and we do appreciate everything people can give. But if you haven't, or if you've never signed up for monthly giving, or you've got a big bonus check or something, I don't know, whatever it is, think about giving to Mockingbird. We could really use it, and I think we make great use of things. Basically, what we're saying is we need your help. So please do give, and give generously.
Yeah. I have this running joke about Ben Madison, who is a guy that comes to our conferences. He used to work for Aaron Zimmerman in Waco. Now he's the rector in New Jersey. We have this joke that we're not allowed to be in the same diocese because we're too loud and we make too many jokes. With the exception that we're allowed to hang out at Mockingbird conferences because we let anybody into Mockingbird. And I actually think that's the beauty of this organization. It's why, I always say I would read this stuff and listen to this stuff even if I didn't have anything to do with working for Mockingbird, because it's a place where everyone can come to find rest. And I believe so much in the work that we've been gifted to do. So give generously. We could use your support.
I would echo that. I was thinking about this today, that if you listen to this podcast, then you probably know that there is nothing on earth that is more needed than the good news of forgiveness of sins and eternal life through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Like nothing that we need more to get through like today, and nothing that we need for eternity. And I think there is no ministry that is doing more to further that message, to get that message out there to people who need it, and then also equip ministers who are spreading that message in their churches, in their ministries, all across the nation and across the world. And so if that is something that you care about, something you need, and you know that other people need as well, then I would encourage you to be generous towards Mockingbird, because Dave and his staff are doing incredible, groundbreaking work. And this is something that is, again, so needed.
If you do want to give, and we do hope you do, go to www.mbird.com/support, or you could find it just by going to www.mbird.com. If you say that you gave as a result of the Mockingcast, we'll give you the Low Anthropology bumper sticker. How's that sound?
Yeah.
On the spot.
Hot.
Now, from that into this. Why We All Take the Same Travel Photos by Laura Maloney in Wired magazine. Someone sent this to me, and I kind of, glanced at it, thought it wasn't that interesting, and then I glanced at it one more time as I was preparing for the show, and I thought, oh my goodness. This is Laura here is talking about the strange phenomenon that travel photos all look the same, and she refers to a guy named John Urey who wrote a book called The Tourist Gaze. He says, what is sought for in a holiday is a set of photography images which have already been seen in tour company brochures or on TV programs. It ends up with travelers demonstrating that they really have been there by showing their vision of the images that they had seen before they set off. This actually gets into a much deeper conversation about the role that photography is currently playing in our world. Here's Laura speaking. It's less about seeing the place than taking the same photo as everyone else. You see this at the Grand Canyon. She said, I knew it was silly to join the crowd of tourists clicking away at the Mona Lisa when I visited the Louvre a couple years ago. Geotagging has made it all too clear how unoriginal those photos are. But I did it anyway, elbowing through the sea of smartphones and selfie sticks for a tourist-free shot at the front. But the visit just didn't feel complete without it. But why? Because photographing something is a way of possessing it. At least that's what Susan Sontag argued in her 1977 classic on photography. She wrote, to collect photographs is to collect the world. It confirms your connection to places and objects once distant and remote, making the world slightly smaller and less alienating. Ironically, though, collecting the world might also mean losing it. Sontag also wrote, a way of certifying experience, taking photographs is also a way of refusing it, by limiting experience to a search for the photogenic, by converting experience into an image, a souvenir. And then she goes on to quote recent studies that support that idea. One suggested that taking a photo of something makes it harder to remember that thing. Another found museum goers were less likely to remember objects if they took photos. You guys big photo takers?
Yeah, like all the time. I was like, this feels directed at me. This is weird. Yeah, I take photos all the time. I'm always on Instagram posting things, and when we're on vacation, I'm especially obnoxious. A huge part of it is like the same thing everyone else is doing, that we're taking these photos of the same things to prove that we were there or that we had a great vacation. I will also say my mother's a photographer, a professional photographer, and has been one since she was like 23. Mm-hmm. And so my family vacations, like I was first wave of family vacations being ruined by photography. Like we'd be like out in the middle of New Mexico and my mom would be like, pull over the car, Owen. and like leap out and spend 45 minutes in front of a cactus. So I don't know.
This is the perfect spot. Joshua Tree.
Exactly.
Sounds scarring. That sounds quite scarring. I'm surprised you take any pictures at all. It's like, I will never take a picture.
Yeah, RJ,
Yeah,
I don't think of you as a photographer in the slightest.
Me?
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, we
Unless-
take family photos for sure. We've
No,
sort of
not that.
perfect-
Of like, you take photos of cars and things, but I'm not getting selfies from you.
No, I'm not big on selfies for whatever reason. I guess I take pictures of cars every so often, but no, when we go on vacation, we definitely do. But we've perfected the whole family panorama, where one of us will start with the camera and one of us will be on one side, and then as soon as we get past that person, they'll switch cameras out, so all four of us or five of us now can make it into a single shot, which is kind of fun. But this article, as you were talking, Dave, it reminded me of Total Recall. You guys remember that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, with whom Sarah got a selfie recently?
Yes, Sarah was
did.
up last week with
Yes.
that.
It's all coming together. But remember, he goes in originally to the lab to get an implanted memory of a vacation he didn't actually take. And it does feel like that can't be that far off. You don't actually have to go there. You just have to have pictures saying you were there and a memory of having been there. But the other thing it reminded me of was that article I sent to you a few weeks back, Dave, from Thrillist, called I discovered the best hamburger place in America and then I destroyed it, which was a confessional from a food critic who spent like a year or more going to hundreds and hundreds of different hamburger joints all across the country and came up with a ranking of the top 100 and crowned this little place in Portland, Oregon as the best hamburger joint in America. And he just loved how authentic it was and the regulars who were there, and the hamburger was amazing. And of course, as soon as he published that article, it completely ruined the restaurant, and now it's shut down. And because it went from being a place where people who loved that restaurant and were really community went and were regulars to suddenly just hundreds and thousands of people showing up to go there one time and to get the picture and to post on Instagram and to never show up ever again. And it really caused me to think about why I do things, like what my motivation is, whether it is love or a desire to self-justify. And my wife and I, she hates Rotten Tomatoes. You guys know Rotten Tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
That critic aggregator website, which will tell you whether a movie has been well reviewed or not, or a TV show. And I love that because I don't want to quote unquote waste my time watching a bad movie, as if my time is so precious. But she hates that because she's like, I don't want someone else to tell me how I'm supposed to feel about a movie before I see it. So part of it, again, is my desire not to waste my time because, again, I think my time is precious, rightly or wrongly. That's a whole nother ego trip. But, wanting to go to the restaurant that eater.com says is good, or
You're a maximizer.
yeah, exactly. Maximize your time, and then it becomes an exercise in self-justification. Like, I'm important, so I do important things, and my time is valuable, so I spend it doing things that other people think that are valuable, as opposed to something that I actually want to do or flows from a place of love or curiosity about the world. So it's a little both end, but that's what I thought about when I read this article, and that Thrillist article is pretty amazing too.
Yeah, I think there's part of it. What she's really saying is that it's a mode of not only self-justification and search for validation, but you're actually trying to control the world. You're trying to make it manageable, fit it into a frame, and some of that is beautiful. I think there's an artistic expression there, and that is what art is: us taking things that move us and trying to put them into a way that are bite-sized and make the world seem a little smaller. But there's also here that irony right now that if you go to a wedding, almost every wedding I've been to in the past year to maybe the last 5 weddings, the officiant at the beginning says the bride and groom request that you would keep your phones inside your pockets, that you would be here present for the ceremony. And I think and partly people can rest assured because there's so many photographs that usually come out of these things, but it is interesting that when we really consider something to be that important, we tell people to stop photographing it.
It's fascinating.
And and also if you're a person that likes live music, I saw Morrissey a couple years ago, and this was kind of a religious experience for me. And there are a lot of people there filming the entire show while watching it, and you want to say, guys, put down your phones. And sometimes you'll have them say, you put down your phone and we'll just be here for it, because no one ever watches those videos back. You listen to the music on Spotify, maybe one picture, I understand. But for the most part, the only reason I took a video was to sort of shove it in my friend's face who I knew had decided not to come. That was the really only reason I did it. And but
a good reason.
It's this strange mix of fear and trying to control things and bring them down to manageable size, while also it's more of this disembodiment. It says like you're trying to inhabit a place by documenting it, but in fact what you're doing is you're disinhabiting it. And we keep talking about how our inability to be present where we are is causing all sorts of suffering and strife. And photography, which is like it's this biblical, Romans 7 type impulse where what we're trying to do to inhabit a place ends up making it us less inhabited. Like it's, you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far with this.
Yeah, I don't know. And it may be because I'm the child of a photographer. I felt like this is a little bit more down on photography than I'm comfortable with. I don't know. And you guys saw that epic vacation photo from my parents that I sent you last night, because I'm not the only one that needs to be traumatized. My parents work really, really hard. Like they do this bizarre thing where my dad writes crop newsletters and there's 3 things that they have to check on every day. The markets, blah, 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 blah. They're like crazy busy, self-employed people. They never get away. And they went on a cruise, which is a pretty new thing for them. They've recently done an AMC movie cruise. No one is surprised these people raised me. And so this was like a fun cruise. And my mom, so Josh, I'm sitting next to my husband last night. He goes, "Hey, did you see this picture your mom sent? Or that your mom posted?" And he holds up this photograph, and my parents are both in swimsuits. I mean, I haven't seen my dad's chest since like 93. I don't know. And and I was like, "Oh, she sent that to you." And he's like, "No, she put it on the internet." And I was like, "What?" And they did like the mud bath at St. Lucia. And I was like, I don't know. It was like a magical thing to see. Like I've never seen anything at St. Lucia and been like, wow, like I feel tender for that place. And suddenly I see my parents who just work so hard, and they had the expression of newlyweds. And I was like, oh my God.
They definitely did.
I feel so lucky I get to see this. You know what I mean? We're not going to talk about what RJ texted back, but I was like...
I felt the same way RJ said. I was like, some real energy happening in this photo.
Real energy in that photo.
Let's just say you really feel like they were newlyweds. I think that's all. That's all. That's it.
That's all you got to say.
Well, what you're saying though, what I'm hearing is that photography is a way of sharing your joy with other people, and your joy almost multiplies when you share it. I think that there's that, and then there's the inability to be present where people are, and the pathological, like people sledding yesterday on the hills, and like how much of it was actually sledding for the kids and how much was photo ops, and you kind of want to...
That's such a dark question, and it's such a good, it's a valuable question, but it is like a question I ask myself all the time. As someone who takes a lot of photographs of my kids doing stuff, I'm like, is this me? Is this them doing this because I want them to have a story, or is this me getting a photograph of them doing this? I mean, the other place I asked myself that question, and I guess so I can't relate to the travel piece as much, but just in raising children, I realized how few pictures I have of my kids in the bath, because you don't want to post pictures of your kids in the bath on Instagram. It's weird. You know what I mean?
But it's cute.
But that means I don't have pictures of my kids in the bath. I mean, it's a weird, so, I mean, I hate to even say that out loud. It makes me feel like a terrible person, and I am, but it's just, it's an odd thing.
These are good discussions to have, for sure. What RJ?
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny what you say about sharing joy, because I do feel like, I don't know, a lot of the time when people post pictures of their children or their babies, they actually, I think, are posting them in joy. Like, look at my beautiful, cute baby. And then people are like, oh my God, if I need to see another baby picture, I'm going to scream. And so this effort to actually share joy and share love comes off even as kind of self-serving or self-aggrandizing. So it's a weird, but I don't think it has to do with photography so much as social media, right?
Yeah.
That show, it used to be someone would come to your house and maybe you would show them pictures of a recent trip or your wedding album or something like that. And it was a more intimate experience where you could talk about it and it wasn't so
People dreaded those.
voyeuristic.
Wasn't that always like a... Wasn't that always
That was like a joke.
The joke, the definition of like you get captive to that wheel where people are just showing you slides.
Yes.
I think
my aunt used to do slideshows. She actually used to get her pictures made into slides and do like the carousel thing in Mad Men. And part of it was cool and part of it was like, oh gosh, here we go again.
Right.
But she was trying to share her joy. That's actually what she was trying to, she wasn't trying to show off, I don't think.
Well, what I also read it not so much as it's that the dynamics that we see in social media predate this, because they're talking about the 1970s and everyone lined up at the Grand Canyon to take the exact same photo, the exact same place, when there's an infinite number of expanses. And what is that instinct, that sort of lemming-like instinct to all have to get the picture that you've already seen before you went? And it's the same thing as like why people seem to laugh louder at the parts of the movie that they've already seen in the trailer. And I always wonder what's going on there. Is it like a recognition of being alive? Is it actually the funniest parts of the movie that are in the trailer? And in context, they make more sense. I always feel that there's that's always been surprising to me. But I'll tell you where we could talk about that all day. But the thing that just blew my mind, I knew it would, was the interview in the New Yorker with Esther Perel. We've talked about Esther Perel before. We named her as one of our favorite pagan priests in the Deja Vu issue of the magazine. She's a marriage therapist. She's from Belgium originally, a Jewish Belgian Jew who has had a very kind of a interesting life and has sort of taken on like a bit of a TED stage celebrity, minor celebrity. But a lot of what she has to say in this interview, it's fascinating because when it comes to talking about modern romance and modern relationships and marriage and children and parents, she's got a lot of unexpected and wise things to say. So here's where we go. She talks at first about something we've spoken about numerous times about the difference in modern marriage from our ancestors. She says that we come from a model where relationships in our village lives, in our communal structures, were very clear. The community gave you your sense of identity. You knew who you were. You knew what was expected of you, and you knew how to behave. You had a lot of certainty, a lot of belonging, zero freedom. But now, with urbanization and modernization, she names a couple things, rules have been replaced by choices. So I think that's a big thing that is changing. What used to be defined by rules and duty and obligation now has to take place in conversation. And so everything is a freaking negotiation. You negotiate with your partner about what matters, where you want to live, if you want to have children, how many children you want to have, if this is the right time to have children. It's an absolute existential smorgasbord. But at the same time, it's very difficult to have to define everything ourselves. We are not just in pain for no reason, is what I'm trying to say. Then she goes on to talk about pain and suffering in her own life, and she talks about her experience growing up with her parents being survivors of the Holocaust. After a kind of experience like the Holocaust, sometimes there are people who are not dead, and sometimes there are people who are alive. That is, some people survive, and some people thrive again. There were homes that were morbid. You just couldn't enjoy because if you experience pleasure, it means you're not vigilant. It means you're not on guard. It means you're not watching for the next danger. And then there were the other people who were really kind of decided to take life as a vengeance and to live it at every moment. And I'm very lucky in that sense that I was in the household that veered to that extreme. But you couldn't be sad for 2 minutes because somebody would say, "What's wrong? What's the problem?" You could never have a problem that was worthy enough of being sad because who can compete with Auschwitz? And so, it's not like this is such a piece of cake either. I'll read a little bit more later, but what do you guys think of that? This interview?
I thought it was amazing, and I've listened to Where Shall We Begin and learned a lot from it, hopefully. I just think she understands people, and she understands the way that relationships work, and she has a tremendous amount of experience, but also a real curiosity, which I appreciate. And she does actually a lot more talking in her therapy sessions than I'm used to, but she's so doggone insightful and has so much experience. Like I loved, a couple of my favorite quotes were, I guess she was asked to sort of consult for a TV show, and then there was the possibility of a podcast, and someone wanted a podcast that would be he said, she said. And Esther says, that's not at all the way a couple works. Actually, it's what I say that makes you say the opposite of what you actually originally intended to say. That then makes me say the thing that I'm going to regret afterwards, or that I've been meaning to tell you for all of God knows how long. And that just made me laugh out loud because it's so true. Like the reactivity, it's not like two reasonable people sit down and have sort of an honest, discussion. It just, there's so much reaction. Whatever your spouse or your partner says, colors what you're going to say and creates division and anger. And then the way that she wraps it up was kind of amazing as well. I think that the definition of love today, quote, "you are my everything," unquote, where you really see it, this complete exaltation is in wedding vows. Have you ever noticed? I mean, it's, "I will wipe every tear that streams down your face before you even notice it's going down." Then she says, "I think a realistic vow is, quote, "I will F up on a regular basis and on occasion I'll admit it." She's just much more cynical and realistic about relationships, but also wants people to be in honest, helpful relationships. And so I think that level of cynicism can be a little bit off-putting to people that are looking for kind of the perfect thing, but can be helpful and grounding as well. And the last thing I'll say is obviously she's not coming from a faith context. And I remember when I'd been married for a few years, it was always important for me to marry someone who shared my quote unquote faith tradition, who was a Christian. And I thought that was about kind of agreeing about the basis on which we would build a life together. But then I actually realized that the most helpful thing about that was recognizing that we weren't in it alone, and that I didn't have to change my spouse and I didn't have to change myself, but that I could sort of count on God to do his work in us and sort of let go of the need to control and affect a little bit. And I would say that fits in well with, what Esther Perel is doing, because what she really is trying to do is get people to listen to one another. And it's incredibly difficult to listen and empathize with one another when you're angry and you're wounded. So I love Esther Perel. Sarah?
Yeah, I'm a big fan too. We listen to these a lot, Josh and I do. She does two things that I find very helpful. She points to people's suffering in a really clear way. And, several of her episodes are about people who there's been indiscretion. Someone's cheated on someone else. And she never quite comes at it the way that you think she's going to. So she points to people's suffering. But the other thing that she does that I find rather magical is that she makes people realize that sometimes things are funny, and people laugh, and she laughs, and she has a kind of like cutting humor that is really generous at moments that people need it. And I think those two things are pretty fundamental in marriage. I mean, it's so funny when you get married, you have, RJ, you're totally right. You have this like checklist. I mean, I definitely had, this is what this person has to be like. And then you enter into it and it almost doesn't matter what you do or do not have in common or how they have met your list at all. It matters that they're willing to let you suffer, and to suffer in front of you. And it matters that like you can like laugh. I don't know. I just find those two things to be like I mean, maybe those are just unique to the Condon marriage, but I feel like those are like our two like complete survival techniques. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's so funny to me. I feel like marriage 12 years in I feel like marriage 2 years in shouldn't even be called marriage. Do you know what I mean? And I know that marriage 12 years in compared to marriage 22 years in, which is more like where RJ and Jamie are, it's just not even the same thing. You know what I mean?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned from Perel, and this is just me, I don't think this is a universal thing, but I think one thing she tries to bring her people to recognize is that so much of conflict devolves into kind of a miscommunication and a fighting about kind of what, quote unquote, actually happened and trying to come to a shared narrative. But sometimes you can't reach a shared narrative. But at the end of the day, what matters is not actually what happened and who started the fight and who reacted and the words that were said, but how each partner feels about what happened, and then the other person's ability to enter into that pain and empathize with that person, and for each party who was injured to feel felt and heard in the midst of their suffering. And I think that's a helpful insight, because oftentimes you're not going to agree about who started the fight or exactly what happened. But if you can have compassion on one another in the midst of your pain and take each other seriously and listen and expect the best of the other person, that just goes a tremendous way in healing wounds and creating intimacy, which is, at the end of the day, what you want. I will say I remain pretty idealistic about marriage, even 19 years in. I love my wife, and I know that she says that. What does she say? Love is not a permanent state, like it fluctuates.
She says, I love this. She says it's not a permanent state of enthusiasm. We think it's disappeared and suddenly it shows up again. It's an active engagement with all kinds of feeling, positive and primitive ones and loathsome ones. So one of the things she says in there is she says that like couples therapy is usually people are there because they're stuck in some way and they keep coming at the same things in the same ways. And she feels like couples therapy is actually sort of like a crust. You're just trying to loosen the crust on the relationship, the stuckness, where they need to be able to see each other in a slightly different light. Like she needs to create the space for the woman to be able to really address her husband in some way, and the husband to address his wife in other ways, in ways that allow them not just to say what they're saying, but for the other person to hear them, to interact with a different part of that person. And you just see a little bit of movement. It was the closest I found to like a God type connection here, outside of just the sort of overall grace that she kind of narrates here. But that if you can, as a therapist, your job is to help kind of unstick just a little bit, so that then God does all this other stuff once people can sort of see each other from a different vantage point. And maybe that's me interpolating a little bit, but that's one of the reasons I love what her way of looking at it is not that she's trying to get them to say certain things or come to certain insights, but to see each other from slightly different angles, or to interact with a slightly different part of the other person, which she knows will loosen the logjam and which is akin to the spirit flowing. And you're seeing someone in a different context. And I remember whenever we travel, that's one of the great things. I mean, whether or not we take pictures is a different story, but we interact. We sort of see a different side of one another and our children too, and it's this really enriching experience. But speaking of family life, I thought we would end by talking about Christmas, and in fact talking a little bit about what our own Carrie Willard wrote at your behest, I believe, Sarah, but I love this story she tells. She's written before about how her family almost didn't, quote unquote, do Santa. And, this is a very hot topic among young parents, especially hot topic, especially Christian parents. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why would I?
Christians and hyper intellectuals are the people I've met. Uber Christians and hyper intellectuals are the ones who don't do Santa Claus.
Why would I lie to my children, Sarah? She says through the years
you lie all the time to your children.
Yeah, why not do it?
Whether or not you acknowledge it, you've lied to your kids like 4 times today.
Do it in the service of a little bit of whimsy and magic instead of just self-serving, getting them to shut up.
You're going to miss the bus. Yeah, exactly. You're not going to miss the bus.
She wrote, over the years, we found ways to make Santa more meaningful. We don't do the naughty, nice paradigm. Not that we don't reward good behavior and remove privileges for less than stellar behavior, but it's not part of our Christmas narrative. And Santa and God aren't exactly linked, but we're not going to have Santa creeping around and practicing the very opposite of our family's faith either. This has evolved naturally over the years without a ton of serious reflection on our parts, but generally the Spirit has moved us to find ways to make Christmas magical without sacrificing our self-imposed high-mindedness. When our eldest son asked about the elf on the shelf, we improvised quickly and deputized 3 wise men from a woolen nativity scene to travel through our house and look for the Star of Bethlehem. I love that. And last year, when the children wanted Gatorade and gum for Christmas, it was Santa who delivered them. Our youngest was dying for a variety of Gatorade flavors to try. oldest, Carrie, wanted nothing less than that. Gatorade is the kind of thing at our house that gets sipped for a few minutes, then left to make a table sticky, only to get drained and recycled half a day later. Gum falls in the same category. I don't know any mom who wants more gum in her life. I love that line. Neither of these things are inherently harmful, but they're not on my shopping list. So imagine my boy's surprise when Santa delivered a Costco-sized flat of Gatorade last year in every flavor imaginable. The stockings were filled with a dozen packages of pink bubblegum-flavored chewing gum. Nasty. My children know that no parent would engage in such indulgent display of grace and generosity. The thing I love about children is that sometimes their wishes are so ridiculously simple, and they can be so easy to please. Gum and Gatorade set the big guy back maybe $20 last year, but they brought so much joy to our Christmas morning. This year, I've heard a rumor that noise, putty, and camouflage face paint will make an appearance in the stockings. There's nothing about camo or face paint that appeals to me either, but I have to admit I can't wait to see the reaction it brings. Gum and Gatorade may not seem like they have anything to do with the Christ child, but they represent the kind of outrageous generosity that Christmas brings to our lives, and the way that only God can bring us the objects of our heart's desire. When my sister dismissed herself from our family life a few years ago, Carrie's written about this and spoken about it, so we can talk about it here. I didn't know I needed more older sisters in my life. Everywhere we've lived, though, God has brought wise women into my life who happen to be exactly her age. This kind of unexpected gift is exactly the glimpse of heaven's grace that I want my children to experience. Even though the world of parenting is not short on advice, it can feel like we are raising our children in a world that is short on magic. This world is hard enough and a little dry, and so our magic can feel like an almost necessary breath of fresh air and a refreshing sip of water during this dark season. I want to remind our children of the beautiful words in the liturgy of the church that we are, quote, heirs through hope of God's everlasting kingdom. And if hope looks like Gatorade and camo face paint, then sign me up. I mean, I got teary.
this piece.
I think it's such
I know.
a beautiful picture. Gatorade and gum and face paint and all these unnecessary things that the only explanation could be Santa.
Would be Santa Claus.
That there's magic.
She posted, she put something up on social media last year, like a few days before Christmas. She's like, oh my gosh, Amazon will deliver anything. And it was like this picture of just like so much Gatorade. And I have to say, like this year, I've thought differently about what I give my kids from Santa Claus because, it is an opportunity to like give them crazy stuff you wouldn't want them to have. Like, and the putty thing, putty is a big, I'm not going to use an expletive, a big deal in our house because we have carpet that is old enough to vote because we live in a rectory and sometimes you have that. And it's white, which was not kid friendly, whoever decided to put that in 20 years ago. And so I already have like putty stains in it, and I have banned putty from our house like permanently. But I'm totally thinking that Santa Claus might put some putty in people's stockings this year, and I'll just be like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like I'm like pumped for this. So. And then I'm gonna make Carrie come over and help me clean the carpet.
It totally got me because Gatorade and gum are two superfluous things. I mean, when it comes to they shouldn't want them, but the definition of something the kids, they don't have any moral justification, shall we say, or any kind of justification. They just want them. They just want them, and they want them a lot. And to give those things, even though they're only there for this sort of superabundance or overflowing and unnecessary joy. I just love that idea because, of course, we think of Christmas. I think the gift-giving tradition is what's so in line with the gospel. The naughty, nice stuff isn't because those aren't gifts; those are wages. But
right.
the gift-giving, the fact that God gives us a gift that we wouldn't even want. It's like someone says, "Surprise! I adopted a child." Like it's. Isn't that what
but it's such a great way to like brazenly tell your children about the gospel. Because our son asked me the other day, if he could get in trouble and not get things from Santa Claus. And I was like, oh no, Santa doesn't work like that in our house. Like, he's just like God. He just gives us things we don't deserve. Like, it came right. My husband was like, you must have planned that in your head. And I was like, I think about it a lot. But I will say that yesterday I had our daughter, who's the younger one. She's 4 in the car. And so she's at the church school. So she's hearing all kinds of like Christmas songs constantly right now. And she's like thinking this was like such a like virtuous thing to do. She's like, hey mama, can we sing Santa Claus is coming to town? But instead of saying Santa, can we say Jesus? And I was like, sure, not thinking. And then I'm like, you better watch out. I'm like, oh no,
Jesus,
we cannot sing this.
RJ, where are you with all this?
We're in a weird place because we have 2 teenagers
Yeah.
who, have a certain perspective on Santa Claus, and then we have a 2-year-old who has no idea what the heck is going on. And so it's bizarre. And I long for the days that our kids would have been super psyched to get Gatorade and bubblegum. But of course, we have one teenage son who never asks for anything and can't even struggles to think about what he might possibly want. And then another one who is like, a list 10 pages long, most of which is just video games and more screens. Although he stopped playing Fortnite recently. He's moved on to Madden. So we're on a different...
Sanctification.
Exactly. It's just
Hashtag.
Another rung on the ladder. I love to give them gifts. But it also, they're like in finals week next week. In some ways, it feels like Christmas is not going to start until they're finally out of school and they've taken their midterm exams, and we're going to have like a week to kind of blow it out. And for me personally, I don't know. Christmas doesn't actually feel like it's begun until I get home from the midnight service at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and usually then I'm up until about 4. Wrapping presents, and I like to do a kind of a scavenger hunt for the big present where I leave clues around the house, and that's the most fun part for me, where my teenage boys are running around the house for 20 minutes, going from clue to clue to clue, trying to find kind of their big Christmas gift. So I look forward to that, and then the day after Christmas is always really nice. That was amazing last year. The house was clean, and the boys were playing with their new things, and my wife and I just watched ridiculous romantic comedies. What's that one with Jack Black and the
Holiday?
the engagement, the holiday, yes, which was ridiculous. And then watched Pride and Prejudice and The Notebook like back to back to back, and just laid on the couch all day and did not feel the least bit guilty or worthless, because it's like we'd done it, it had happened. But that feels like Christmas to me. It's every single year. It's this mixture of anticipation and dread. And I always feel a little bit guilty for the dread part. And then I think again about Mary on donkey back, pregnant, no room at the inn, laying the baby in a manger. Like, what is going on? And the anticipation and dread that they must have been experiencing. And then, if you've had a child, you know what that's like the craziness of the labor experience. And then once it happens, everything gets kind of quiet, and newborn babies sleep, they've got a lot of sleeping to do because they've been through a lot, like through a trauma, and so does a mom. And that's the sweetness is like right afterwards. But until that moment, it's anticipation and dread. And so I don't know. That's what I'm looking forward to this year. But I'm not quite there yet. I feel like a few more days and I'll kind of dive in, feet first.
I think we tend to make Christmas not just about both dread and anticipation. I think we just naturally, instinctually, we do what Neil did, what all the songs do. We kind of put the conditions back in, and we make it. We take the only love we know is the humankind, which is the stuff that Esther talks about. And it was funny. I thought to me in the last paragraph of her interview where she says that this love that I will dry every tear from your eye before it even falls down, like that's actually the love of God that we see in Christmas, which shoulders all of the dread and all of the anticipation, and also is that which is sort of given freely but not like we give. And so I don't know, there's a lot of tremendous hope for me at Christmas time with the ones that I love, imperfectly celebrating the advent, as it were, of the love that is not imperfect, that is perfect and is sort of made perfect in this strange feeding trough type, garage, almost gas station like scenario. So our Christmas, we too have one of these kids, one kid whose presence is everything, and one kid who is much more about experiences and kind of doesn't care. So how we deal with that, but I know that the Santa thing is big for us in terms of illustrating there's more going on than what you see, and in fact, not everything that you didn't see that's going on is bad, and God is actually here with the Gatorade and the gum. Not just at Christmas, but I think every day in certain ways. Anyway, maybe that's trite, but that's my Christmas hope.
Yeah, I mean, for me this season, especially, and I'm mentioning her at every turn. She's actually giving me a little money on the side. Fleming Rutledge's book on Advent. Just kidding. She's not giving me any money. I'm just obsessed with her book. Feels. I don't know. I always hate to say this because it's just such a presumptuous sort of egotistical to our era thing to say, but things feel really hard right now. The news cycle feels really hard right now and really bleak and hopeless. And I mean, we just had this video of three people who are leading our country, screaming at each other, and when she points us towards Jesus coming back, I can find hope there. I can find rest there. I can know that even though there are all these people in the world who are suffering enormously in ways I cannot imagine, that God has consolation for them as well as for me. And this is a season that I felt that more profoundly this Advent than I've ever felt it before. And I'm convinced it's because of Fleming's book. But it's kind of chilled me out a little bit this season. It's interesting. I'll be honest, when on the note of marriage, when my husband called me and he's like, I've got some really bad news about Santa Claus. Neil saw everything. I was like, I don't know. I feel like I would have been much angrier with him in any other Christmas season. But this season I was like, okay, you know what I mean? There's just, I don't know. Something's just kind of shifted, and I don't exactly know why. And next Advent I could be back to feeling crazy, but this Advent has felt there's been a lot of consolation in it for me, because I know that Jesus will come back and everything will be okay. So I can put my faith in that. And in the meantime, we have the sweet glimpses of grace that I am totally with you, David, our Gatorade and bubblegum that we get to give to little boys who think that is the craziest thing for Santa Claus to leave them, which is exactly how I feel about the gospel. So
I think that's a perfect note to end on. What do you say? We will be, thank you, both of you, for all of the fun we've had this year revving this engine back up. It's a privilege and an honor. It's been a great gift to me, frankly. I so often feel like I'd do it if no one were listening. And wanted to say, I don't think we probably won't get together next 2 weeks. So we will see people. We will hear you. We will talk to you. You will hear from us again in the new year. But we hope you have a blessed, and just warm, joyful Christmas, and a wonderful new year, and get some rest. And see you soon.
Bye. Thanks, Dave.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by the Narrativo Group. And if you like what you've heard, please do drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Until next time.
Praise the Lord. praise